All right, today we're going to be looking at Trump on the Shawn Ryan podcast. I'm not going to watch the full interview. I think it's like a over an hour long. You can check out the full interview on Shawn Ryan's show, his channel. But we're going to look at a little bit of it here now just to kind of get an idea as to the type of topics they're talking about. I believe that Shawn Ryan was a former member of the, I believe, CIA and military contractor. So he's probably going to come from this uh, with more of like a military mindset, asking questions about what Trump can do for the military and maybe the safety of our country going forward. So let's take a look here.
What would you like to see happen with Russia, Ukraine? How would you like to see that deal go down?
So it would have never happened. It didn't happen. A lot of people say, well, how do we know? Actually, Democrats even say that wouldn't have happened October 7th. Israel wouldn't have happened. But what I've told people, I know Putin very well. I told him, don't do it. It was the apple of his eye. We would talk a lot. And Ukraine was the apple of his eye. I said, don't do it, don't do it. I won't go exactly what I said in terms of why you can't do it, but you can't do it. And he wouldn't have done it. He wouldn't have done it anyway. But when he saw Afghanistan, I think that's when he really said, this is a time that he can go in. And I was out. By this time, I was out. But when he saw Afghanistan, I think that changed his whole thinking toward us. He lost respect for the United States. He also has no respect for Biden. Who does? So Putin went in. Zelensky was involved in the impeachment hoax number one. There was a hoax, a couple of hoaxes, which I won both of them. But he was very honorable. I made a very innocent phone call to him to congratulate him on his victory. One of the people that worked for me, not the brightest one, kept asking me to call Zelensky. Call Zelensky. Oh, please call him and congratulate him, because they wanted to do an oil deal or something. I said, call him, and for the United States. And call him and congratulate him. Kept asking me. Finally, I called him. And they took that call, which was a congratulatory call, and they made it into an impeachment, which, and I will say, I got great support from the Republicans. The Republicans were with me in Congress. I think I got 196 out of 196 votes. And when did you ever hear that about the Republicans, right? I had great support. Jim Jordan and all these guys that were great. But and in the Senate, I had great support too. So it was wiped out easily. But I got to know Zelensky then because they asked him at a news conference or something, did President Trump say anything that was threatening to you or bad? This was the reason you got impeached. Can you believe this? And he said, not at all. He was a gentleman. He called me to congratulate me. He said it was a very normal call. Now, he could have grandstanded. I respect him for what he did. He could have said, oh, yeah, I felt very threatened and all that. Just the opposite. He said nothing. He did nothing wrong. And that sort of ended it all. But he was very honorable. I know other people might have done something that could have been different. Now, it also changed because...
So this brings up an interesting point, and I think it's something that was of concern to a lot of Trump supporters the first time around in 2016, not 2020, when he actually won and took office. He put a lot of people in his cabinet and on his team that, were just typical elite type people that you wouldn't want in there, people that the typical rhinos, if they get in, would put in, on their team and as their advisors and in their cabinet. And when he did this, a lot of people were kind of like, wait a second, I voted for this guy who was going to come in and shake things up and quote unquote drain the swamp, but he ended up appointing a lot of swamp members to his team. And, sometimes you think, oh, well, maybe, coming from his perspective, he thought those people were either most qualified for the job because they had, done that type of stuff before. Maybe he could just, coach them or navigate them in the right way to do things the way he wanted them done. Or maybe he was just going with that old adage of, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. But whatever happened, it was a disaster because there was a lot of problems that went on during his first presidency that really slowed things down and yielded a lot of progress that he could have made in certain areas because he had people in his team that were like a cancer. They were not helping. They were hurting. They were trying to, deceive or manipulate him into doing things. Trump's not that type of guy, I don't think. And I think everybody kind of knows that about him, is that he'll listen to people's advice, but he doesn't really take orders from people. He'll listen, he'll hear them out, but then he'll kind of just do whatever it is he thinks is best, which I think is probably the best way to operate, especially, coming from a business background like Trump has and I have. You kind of want to confide in people and get their opinions because maybe people can see things that you can't see. They can offer a perspective that you are maybe missing because you have tunnel vision. You're so focused on what it is that you're doing. So it's good to always hear everybody out, but it's best to make decisions based on your own gut instinct, based on what you think is best. And that's what a leader really does. So it sounds like this guy, whoever it was that he didn't name, was trying to advise him to do something that sounded like it would have been a setup. It sounded like they were trying to set him up to call Zelensky, have a conversation with him, and then use that to try and indict him. So that's the problem that he had the first time around. He had a lot of snakes in his home, people that were they acted like they were on his side, but they were actually trying to take him down. Hopefully he won't make that mistake again this time around and actually appoint better people for the job. There's a lot of great people now than there was back in 2016. There's a lot of, new people that came up out of nowhere that were not even on the map in 2016 that are now doing great things and looking to get involved and help reform not only the Republican Party, but the Democrat Party and also just government in general. And there's a lot of good people that are trying to, bring their services to the marketplace outside of the public sphere, just running a business or something that will better the economy or better the world because they're, offering something that is going to help us advance as a nation. So hopefully we see a lot more of that. Hopefully this time around, Trump actually appoints people to his cabinet and in his inner circle, his campaign, his advisors that are genuinely have the best interests of the country in mind. But let's see where this goes.
By luck, the phone call was taped, and it was a perfect call. And they had already started the impeachment process. And when crazy Nancy Pelosi saw the phone call, which was two great stenographers, military stenographers, every word was perfect, right? Very professional. Every word was exactly my conversation is. It was perfect. Congratulations. I actually said, if you find any corruption in your country, please report it to the Attorney General of the United States, which they have to do. We had an agreement with them because Ukraine has been traditionally a very corrupt country. I said, if you find any corruption, please report it to the Attorney General. And what's better than that? And basically, I congratulated him on his victory. But when he went, and by the way, when they saw that the call was essentially recorded, they died. Mm-hmm. They said, how can Nancy Pelosi looked at this idiot Schiff and said, how can you get us to do this? Shifty Schiff is the one that sort of led the charge. He made up all sorts of things. Many of them made up statements, but that war is much more devastating than people understand. And people freeze to death in the winter. Russia's a great winter fighter. They won. They beat Germany and they beat Napoleon. They're not easy to beat.
Yeah.
And they're a massive military. And Ukraine isn't. But Ukraine has us giving them a lot of money. One of the things that's unfair is that you mentioned 170 or so, but I think we're into 250 billion worth of equipment and money and everything else. And Europe is probably at 75 or 80. And I said, they have to equalize. Why are you not? It's much more important for Europe than it is for us. We have an ocean separating us, right? Whereas Russia is right at their doorstep. And Ukraine has always been like sort of a guardrail. It was to Russia. Russia's always been a little difficult, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. And whether it's Russia or Soviet Union for a while, etc. But the problem you have, and thing that most irks me is all you have to do is say, you got to catch us. You know, Europe, if you add up the countries, is essentially the same size as the United States. Because of certain things I did, we're actually now bigger, but the economy is relatively the same. You know, you add up all the European countries and compare, and they should have paid at least $150 billion more than they've paid. We're way ahead of.
So that's something that's a good point that he's making from an economic standpoint. I don't think people understand really how big the United States is. Besides land mass, I think it might be the third biggest country in the entire world, probably Russia and then Canada, just based on land mass. America, I think, is the third. But in terms of economy, America's economy, so GDP, gross domestic product, money that we bring in, is about as big, if not bigger, especially under Trump's economy, than all of the European countries in Europe. All of them. You take them, combine them together, and their GDP is still probably a little bit less than our GDP. So our one country is beating out all of those other countries in terms of economy. And that's the thing I don't think people really understand. They don't really comprehend outside of their little sphere. If America is trading their goods and services with the entire world, and our country is basically doing the same amount as all of the continent of Europe, if we fall economically, that's going to have a catastrophic impact that affects the entire world. If we're the number one economy in the world and we collapse, subsequently, it's going to negatively impact other countries. So, you know, it's kind of short-sighted thinking. I don't really understand how people think this is a benefit, but when you see, you know, other countries that are considered threats to America, foreign threats, trying to take down America, I understand trying to beat us competitively and become the superpower and take our place, but to take us down is only going to have a catastrophic impact on your country as well. You can't have the biggest company fall and it doesn't impact the surrounding countries. Just look at, like, for example, Detroit had, Ford Motor Company. When they pulled out of there, the whole city collapsed. I think at one point they were like 2.5 or 3 million people, and they went down to 500,000 people in terms of population. People fled that city. It was no longer a thriving city because of that one company was basically the backbone of that entire city. I could be wrong on some of the details, but for the most part, that's the type of impact that the biggest thing has. If that pulls out of the equation or something happens to that where it falls, it's going to have a catastrophic impact. So other countries should be rooting for America, not rooting for us to fall, but rooting for us to succeed, because if we succeed, they succeed too. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of issues and problems with America. We shouldn't be going around the world nation building and interfering with foreign affairs. It's actually not even constitutionally correct, but we should work together. America should work with other countries should work with America, so that we can all rise up together. That makes the most sense in the world. Competition is good, but we also want collaboration. Collaboration is even better. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we should really all be rooting for each other. No one should be hoping that anyone or any country fails. So let's continue.
And I say they have to equalize. But I will get that war settled. It would have never began. It's so devastating. Many more people, when you're going to see the end result, just like they lied about jobs today, where the 818,000 jobs were fake. They did that to look good. So, before an election, that wasn't supposed to come out. That was supposed to come out after the election. And they had a leaker somewhere in the statistical department and in Department of Labor.
What would you have invested that $175 billion into our infrastructure? Would you have maybe put it into the power grid?
Well, your power grid, we have everything. I mean, we also have $36 trillion in debt. you know, we're doing all of this. You know, when I rebuilt the military, I came in, and you probably remember this. I thought it was terrible. We had no ammunition. Did you know that?
I
You
did.
know, we had no ammunition. Our ammunition stock was empty because we had given it to all these people that we defend and that hate us. And I came and just before I got there were people saying in our military that we have no ammunition. I said, who are these stupid people that would say that anyway? Why would you say that? Why would somebody say we have no ammunition? It's terrible. Even if it's true, you don't want to say it.
Uh-huh.
And we had no ammunition. Over the first year, first thing I did was fill up every storage house with, you know, we had these empty storage houses. They were packed to the gills. And then these guys gave most of it to, almost all of it. Now we have no ammunition again, by the way. These guys gave the ammunition to Ukraine. They gave it massive amounts of missiles and bullets and everything. We gave it to Ukraine.
Yeah, that's another huge thing. You know, that's not a Democrat or Republican thing. That's not an issue that only affects one side. That affects the entire United States. All of the people living in this country will be negatively impacted by us not having our security measures in place to the fullest force. You could have a gun, you could have 50 guns. If you have no bullets, you have nothing. You have a paperweight, right? It's useless. That is really, it goes beyond bad policy. It doesn't even make sense why somebody would do that, would give away our ammunition to another country and then leave us vulnerable. Because even if you're a dictator and you come into power, right? You want all the ammunition you can get to protect yourself because you want to continue to stay in power. So even if you're a bad person, you know, that's a bad move on your part. Even if you're trying to corrupt the government, overthrow it, whatever, that's a bad move on your part because it's going to negatively impact you. It leaves you vulnerable, right? The only thing that makes sense to me is that that's done by design. That's done to make America vulnerable so that we can fall, so that when they come for, when the foreign threat comes to attack us, they have a better chance of winning. Only someone who wants to see America fail and take this superpower down would do that, would put that situation in place to make us vulnerable in that way. It doesn't make sense for any country to not have ammunition to defend themselves. I'm not saying they should have it to go out there and start wars. We don't want that. And actually, it's very American to be anti-war. It's rooted in who we are. The only war that we really, wanted that at that time, had to be done, had no choice, was the American Revolutionary War, because they needed to do that in order to get the British off their backs so that they could be free. But after that, America really started forming. We weren't going out right away. The colonists weren't going out and saying, okay, next move is we're going to conquer this country. No, they just wanted to build their own land and have their own country. They didn't want to be bothered with anybody. And they were very strongly against foreign affairs, getting involved in other countries and trying to, decide what's best for them. That's their job. But we have to arm ourselves. We have to have protection, and anybody would want this. I know that there are many people in this country that are anti-gun because they're afraid of guns and they think that guns leads to violence. But in a vulnerable moment when their life's at threatened, they're going to wish they had that protection. They're going to wish they did. And you could hate it, but it's like a necessary evil. You have to have it. So for somebody to do this, it shows that this is like a deliberate attack to take away our defense mechanism so that we can't protect ourselves from a foreign threat that tries to come in and take us out from the inside out or from the outside in. But this is why America is the greatest country in the world, because the military might not have guns, but America has guns, right? The people have guns, and we have a Second Amendment right to protect those guns, to protect us having those guns. And it's not just guns, it's really anything. And that's why the founders made it the Second Amendment, because they knew it was so much more important. Like, politicians could get crazy. They could do stupid things like this, give away all of our bullets. The people at the end of the day have to have the right to be able to protect themselves when the government won't do that, So that's a great point, and that's something that, it doesn't matter which side you're voting for. that issue has to speak to you. If you want to live in a place that's safe, that you can call home, that your children can call home, that you can live peacefully at, go out to, for a walk and not be nervous that you're going to, be attacked or, God forbid, killed. You want this country to protect you. You want the nation at the federal level, especially in the military, to protect you from enemies, because there are people out there that do want to do people harm for just no reason or for their reasons that they have. And we have to be realistic about that. So, yeah, that's a great point.
So I would say this: Ukraine, in a lot of ways, is very brave. But if we didn't help them, they would have lost in the first week. And we did help them. Europe helped them also, but they should have done much more. And I say this: if we ever, with NATO, as you remember, when I first came in, at the time we had 28 countries, and only 7 of them were paid up. The rest of them were delinquent. They owed the money, huge amounts of money. And Obama would go there, he'd make a speech and he'd leave. Bush went, made a speech and he left. I went, looked at the books and I said, you guys, you haven't paid. You got to pay. And I went back the next time and I said, you got to pay. If you don't pay, they said, well, if we don't pay, one of the presidents of one of the countries said, if we don't pay, will the United States defend us against Russia in case of a war? I said, no, we won't even think. You mean you're delinquent? If you're delinquent, we are not going to defend you if you're delinquent. As soon as I said that, the money came in by the billions. I got $400 billion. These guys would never pay. They would have never paid. Why should they pay if we were
so
paying?
That's all it took, was you saying we're not going to back them if Russia
Oh, had I not
invades,
said that?
and they paid.
Yeah, had I said we will back you, they would not have paid. Yeah.
This is so much bigger than just, this guy getting into office or this guy getting into office or, this team versus this team. It's so much bigger than that. This is about trying to take this nation down because it's the greatest superpower in the world and everybody always wants to be on the top of the mountain, right? And when you're up there, it's great for a moment, but when you look down, you see a bunch of people coming after you because they want to take your place. But to allow people to just not pay their bills is not sustainable. And whatever politician would allow that, whether it be Obama when he was in office at the time or, Congress or whoever, it's unbelievable. Why would you, there's no benefit to America. There's no benefit to you as a politician because you look weak. And then if you're weak, the people don't respect you. They're probably not going to vote you back in. Not in Obama's case, he got voted back in. But, the local politicians, the congressmen, they can get voted out. And a lot of them want to hold on to that position dearly because they crave power, they crave authority, they crave being in positions like that. So for them to, just allow these other countries to not pay their bills, it doesn't make any sense because it's such an easy fix. If you don't pay your bill, this is what's going to happen. If you do pay your bill, this is what's going to happen. And there's really not much they can do about it because America is the superpower in the world. They need our protection. They want our protection. Whether or not we should be protecting them, that's up for debate. But in those situations, the deal is you pay your bills, we'll protect you. And I mean, it's so funny because, imagine the mafia doing that in New York back in the day. Somebody says, oh, I can't pay my bill, but you're still going to protect my store, right? And the mafia's like, oh, yeah, of course we are, but you really should pay your bills. They would be walked all over immediately, and that'd be the end of that. Nobody would even find them as a threat or care about them, and their organization would have never grew. I'm not defending the mafia. I'm not saying that they're a good organization, but they got to power because they extorted, they held people accountable for, whatever deals they made. I mean, it wasn't right what they did. They had no right to come in and do those things, but they were able to get away with it because they told people, we'll protect you, you pay. You don't pay, we don't protect you. And, we might even go further than not protecting you. But that's the type of stuff that it just seems so ridiculous when you hear it that you're like, how could this even go on? How could this even be where you just say, yeah, no problem, you don't have to pay, and we go on with our lives? America's hurting, all these countries are getting away with, not paying their bills, but then we're protecting them and we're using our resources for them. that's not fair. That's not justice or equality or however you want to put it. So how could you vote for policies like that when it doesn't even make any sense? Unless you want to see this country fail, unless you want to see this nation collapse, you would never think that was a good idea. Even if you're on the outside of this country, if America fails and they're protecting you, you fail because now you're vulnerable. You're not protected anymore. So even if you're not in America, you don't have to be an American to agree with those policies, and to stand by this nation uh, by doing the right thing to support them, and vice versa, they support you. It goes hand in hand.
How many are delinquent
And
now?
I took a lot of heat from the press for that, because they said, President Trump wants to get out of NATO. Look, NATO is very unfair to us because we spend far more than we should be spending on NATO. These other countries, which many of them are very rich, they don't spend. It's a very unfair thing. NATO, for us, is a very unfair thing. But the worst part is Europe, to us, on trade, is horrible. They don't take our farm products. They don't take our cars. I said to Angela Merkel, Angela, how many Chevrolets do you have in the middle of Germany? She said, none. I said, that's right. How many do you have in Munich? She said, none. I said, that's right. You know how many Mercedes-Benzes, BMWs, and Volkswagens? We have millions. I said, it's going to have to change. They take advantage of us on trade, not quite like China, but not that far off. We lose $250 billion a year with Europe, trading with Europe. So we defend them because the NATO deal was so bad, but I made it much better and I got them to pay. And 2% is too little, by the way, also. That 2% is not the right number. But I got them to pay. So we defend them, a very bad deal for us. We were paying, before I got there, I say we were paying 90% of the cost of NATO.
90%?
Yes. And I hate to use this word because you have some young, brilliant future soldiers watching, but they screw us on trade. So they screw us on trade, and we're defending them. It's always a one-way street. When I came in, we had such bad trade deals with South Korea, with Japan. Abe was great, by the way. He's a great man. He got assassinated. But we had such bad trade deals with so many countries. China. I made a great trade deal with China. They have to buy $50 billion a year of our product. But I don't even talk about it because when COVID came in, it was such a bad, I had a great relationship with President Xi, and I will again. And I don't see, a lot of people think, oh, you have to be tough with this. We have so many advantages, but we're not going to have the advantages long if we don't get smart, because our country's going bad. And now we have really stupid people running our country.
Yeah, that's another amazing takeaway from what he said. He's talking so casually about another country's president and said, oh yeah, he got assassinated. What a shame. It's so crazy to be at that level where, you're such a threat to people. They literally kill you, but it's not like, going back to the mafia before, it's not like they kill you and they hide the body and then you're like, oh, what happened to Jimmy? We don't know. They literally kill you. Everybody knows what happened. The crooked politicians on the inside weren't happy with that political figure, so they took him out and then installed somebody that they wanted that will get their agenda across, which is antithetical to the people's agenda. And just the way he talks about it so casually, it's so crazy. If anybody were in that situation and somebody's, trying to assassinate them or assassinated their peers, they would be like, I'm out. This is too much for me. I'm not going to be in something where I'm literally risking my life, unless it's, it's something that makes sense. Like, you're being a cop or in the military where, yeah, you can get killed, but 9 out of 10 times every day is kind of routine, mundane. And then there's that 1 out of every 10 that's like a crazy day because it just happened to be that way. But a lot of people would run from that. A lot of people would not take that on. And he made a good point in another interview I saw, or it might have been this one, I'm not even sure. But the assassination rate per president, like how many presidents there were. So there's 46, right? Because Biden was 46, and there'll be 47. Out of the amount of presidents there were, the amount that were assassinated is like a significant percentage of the total, right? So what is it? Maybe 4 or 5 who are assassinated, maybe even more that were actually shot at or shot and hit. That number is astronomical, right? If there's 4 or 5 and there's 46 presidents, that's 10% basically, you know. So your job is a 10% death rate or a 10% attempted death rate. I mean, that's insane to be in that type of line of work, but that's where we are, where, you literally try and just help save the country, economically and, infrastructurally, safety, in terms of safety. And people want to kill you because they don't want you to do that. It's just so crazy that, we live in a world and in times where this type of stuff goes on, but it does. And, it happened throughout history. It's not new. But the way he just talks about it so casually is very like amazing that he could just let it roll off and like, yeah, they shot me in the ear. They killed this guy who was my peer. Yeah, they're trying to, take us out. It's wild the way that he just casually, lets that out there. All right, so let's wrap this up.
Biden is a stupid person.
What
He
are
was
some of
stupid
those
25 years
advantages?
ago, by the way. What?
What are some of those advantages that we have over China?
Well, we have economic advantages. We have very big, powerful companies. We have companies that were formed a long time ago when we had entrepreneurship was very important. Today, everybody wants to give everything away. I reduced taxes in our country. Largest tax cuts in history, largest regulation cuts in history. That's why I had the best jobs anybody. Then we had the bounce back after COVID. But we had just prior to COVID coming in, we did better on the economy than the country's ever done, ever in its history, not even close.
That's another final point I'll make before we wrap this up. It's just so crazy that, we put up with these taxes. Taxation is insane in America today. And we put up with them because the government is growing and, growing at a rate, and also in areas where it's not even technically like valid. The government and the breakdown of the government is actually listed in the Constitution. It tells you exactly how many departments of government there should be, and that's it. No more than that. And we have so many departments in government now, so many branches, so many new things that were just like created out of thin air that they're like, oh, this is part of the government. Now we need to put our budget towards that. And all that comes from taxes. So it's wild because when this country was founded, and, the story of the Boston Tea Party, they literally dumped all the tea in the harbor over a 1% to 2% tax. And now we pay 30-40% of our income to the government to fund all these, government programs and departments and things that were just created out of thin air. It's wild that the people put up with this, and they put up with it for so long, when the beginning of this country, the people that, were there literally would not tolerate a 1% to 2% tax rate. And we tolerate 30, 40, sometimes even more. It's wild. So it looks like, it's a long interview, over an hour, and he seems to be talking a lot about the economy right now, but I would imagine he's probably going to talk a lot about military infrastructure and things that he'll do there. And then, maybe a little bit about some other policies that he's, going to implement if he wins. Seems like a good interview. I like, Shawn Ryan. He's a good interviewer. He has a different approach, and I like his style. It's unique to what's on the market today. So definitely check that out. If you want to watch the full interview, check it out on Shawn Ryan's channel. But that's it for today. All right. That's a wrap. Final point. Check out my book, Little Boy Full of Love. That's me on the back. And this is a little sneak peek on the inside. It's a great book. I wrote it for my son. It's a children's book, and teaches a lot of great life lessons. Really makes for a great gift if there's somebody that has a child that you would like to get that for. It's available right now on Amazon, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, and a lot of other online platforms. But more importantly, it's actually available in a lot of bookstores across the country. We're in about 15 or 16 different states right now, and expanding a lot of up and down the East Coast and the Midwest, hopefully expanding more into the West now. But we definitely recommend you check out the local bookstores near you that it's available at to support local businesses, because we're big on that on this channel. We really believe in, small and local businesses. It's the backbone and, basically what founded America. So if you want to find out which bookstores near you are currently carrying it, go on my Instagram page on the posts tab. You'll see a lot of the bookstores that it's currently being carried in right there. You can just see which ones are near you. But if not, if you want to, get it online, you can get it online. You can actually ship it straight from your Amazon account to somebody. If you want to gift it to them, instead of getting it delivered to you and then reshipping it out, you could just ship it right from your Amazon account. But it's also available on our storefront too. So check out the links in my bio and in the show notes as well. You'll see the link for the Amazon storefront as well, along with a lot of other great products that we have on there that we recommend, that we use in our daily life. So check that out today.